Hey everybody, welcome back to Garage Band Guitarist. And this is the last of our preliminary lessons before we actually get into playing the guitar. And this is another one I tagged as sort of being optional because if you've ever played guitar at all in the past, you may know all this stuff that's in this particular video, and so you might want to kind of fast forward or play this at double speed to get through it, or skip it altogether if you played a little bit. But for those who've never really picked up a guitar before, there's some important stuff in here, and so let's go ahead and go through this little lesson on getting to know your guitar and making friends with it, basically, is the idea here. And so the first thing to talk about when we're talking about getting to know our guitar is how do you hold the guitar, right? And it might seem kind of obvious to you, but just to be super clear about it, you put your left hand on the neck up here, and you put your right hand down here. And it ought to be set up so the thicker lower strings are at the top and the thinner higher strings are down here on the bottom. Now, some people play the guitar the other way around. They call this left-handed playing, but it's not really, doesn't really have to do with whether you're left-handed or right-handed. But I would recommend to you to play what's called right-handed because your right-handed guitars are just much more available. It's hard to find sometimes a left-handed guitar without special ordering it and things like that. And it just makes your life a lot easier in a lot of other ways because probably 97% of people play the guitar in this orientation with the left hand on the neck and the right hand as the strumming hand. Okay, so that's how you hold the guitar. You probably knew that, and you've probably picked up a guitar before, but there it is, just to make sure everybody's on the same page with that. Okay. The next thing is where do you kind of set the guitar? How do you hold it relative to your lap, right? And so there's really two basic ways to do that, and it's one on your right leg and one's on your left leg, okay? And so at the bottom of the guitar, most guitars, there's a curved part like this, and what I'm doing right now is holding it in the most common and traditional kind of setup, which is with that curved part on my right leg, okay? And so the fretboard's here, and the guitar is kind of centered over my right leg over here. Okay. The alternative is to put it on your left leg like this, and then it puts this bigger part in between your legs. And I'll back up in a second so you can see that a little bit more clearly. And some people feel more comfortable with that. And what I would just suggest to you is see what feels more comfortable for you and do it, okay? Now, some people will say that this is better to put it on your left leg, even though I would say the majority of people put it on the right leg, but because of the way that your hand is relative to the fretboard. And classical guitar players play like this all the time. They think it's better to do all the different things they need to do in terms of reaching around on the fretboard, and you'll see that if you see a classical guitar player playing. But to really maximize that, to make it work really well, you need a little stool or something to put your foot on. And you'll see classical players have a little stool when they're playing that has their foot on, and it just props up their left leg a little bit more, and so it keeps us in a really nice position. I don't want you to have extra apparatus you don't really need. You don't need to drag a stool around for the kind of playing we're doing. And most people are just fine like this. And you can do it this way too with it on your left leg if you feel like it. So let me just back up so you can see clearly what I'm doing here. So here's the right leg orientation. Okay. And then here's the left one where this part is in between my legs. Okay, and so either one is fine. You take your choice and see what feels comfortable to you. That's kind of a theme with this course, is to find ways of doing things that feel comfortable so that you're not dissuaded in any way from practicing. It makes you feel good about doing it. And so either one of those perfectly fine way to hold the guitar when you're practicing. Okay, now there's another issue that comes up when you start thinking about playing in front of other people at some point. And a lot of people would prefer to stand up when they're playing, okay? And that changed the orientation of the guitar a lot, all right? And so when you do that, you want to put a strap on. But here is the thing with this, okay, is that you want to keep the guitar in the same position, the same orientation that it is when you're practicing sitting down as when you're standing up, right? And there's a tendency, there's a bias that causes us to sort of let the guitar drop down lower. So this is where it was when I was sitting down, okay? But then when I stand up to play, I'll let it drop down a little bit lower. And that's not a good thing because you've been practicing it with it here. And then now you're going to go out and play in front of people and you're going to change it. And it's not a lot, it's not a big change, but it's enough to make things, less comfortable and less like it was when you practiced everything. And so make sure when you put the strap on that it actually is holding it in the same position that it is when you're practicing, especially if you're holding it on your lap when you're practicing, okay? You can also practice standing up with the strap on. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I find that it's more sort of convenient. I don't have to get a strap out and do all that when I'm practicing an acoustic guitar. It's easier to just grab the guitar and start practicing, right? And so I don't necessarily stand up when I'm practicing an acoustic guitar, but you can. And if you want to do that, great. And then it'll be in the same position when you're practicing versus when you're actually playing somewhere. When people play out and play acoustic guitar, they don't have to stand up. Some sit on stools, some sit on chairs, and that's perfectly fine too. But if you want to stand up when you're playing, you may want to just think about that orientation of the guitar when you put the strap on. Now, when you're practicing an electric guitar, it's a little bit different because electric guitars have much smaller bodies, okay? And they have smaller bodies in two ways. And one is the depth of the guitar, okay? Acoustic guitar is much thicker, okay? But the body itself is smaller too. And those two things combined, when you're setting them on your lap, makes the guitar lower, and it's not in the same kind of orientation that an acoustic guitar is. And so you may not want to sit down and practice the electric guitar. You may want to stand up. You're probably going to stand up when you play an electric guitar too, so might as well practice the way you're going to play, right? And I think that's, generally that's probably pretty good advice. This doesn't feel as comfortable to me. There's just not as much to kind of hold on to as there is with an acoustic guitar, and your arms are kind of in a slightly different position and stuff because the guitar and the neck is lower, and you don't have the same place to rest your arm on this side with a smaller body, okay? And so I almost always practice electric guitar standing up when I practice it for that reason, okay? All right. Now, when we play electric guitar or acoustic guitar, but electric in particular, I mentioned there's a tendency to drop the guitar down lower, and I'm just going to advise you against that. Don't get that guitar too low. One of the reasons I think we do it is because we think we look cooler when the guitar is low. I mean, look at this guy, okay? That's cool, man. Look at, it's down by his knees practically, okay? But that, puts your arm and your hand in a different kind of position. It's harder to do a lot of different things when the guitar is so low like that. And so, some people do it and they get away with it and they've figured out how to do it, but it's not ideal. And really, having the guitar up higher is much better for your hand position and your ability to move around the neck and so on. And, and the coolness factor, okay, it's not meaningless, I suppose, but there's a lot of really great guitar players. Most of the really best guitar players have the guitar up pretty high, and, like Eddie Van Halen, okay, he didn't have his guitar down super low. here's a picture. He has it up. He's got it way up here like this, right? And he's pretty cool. So I think you can get away with it with having your guitar up a little bit higher, and it'll help you play better. Okay, so that's something to think about when you're practicing and when you're playing, whether you're using an acoustic or an electric. Keep that guitar up pretty high. Okay, all right. Let's move on to the pick. Okay. And how do you hold a pick properly to play the guitar? Well, I'm going to just say, first of all, there's a lot of different kinds of techniques with picks and things that you might learn as you get more advanced. But we're going to talk about the basic way that you want to hold the pick when you're playing the strumming kind of guitar that we're going to play in this set of lessons, okay, in this course. And so what you want to do is hold the pick between your thumb and your index finger like that. And those really should be the only fingers that touch the pick, okay? That's how you should hold the pick. You shouldn't have 2 fingers or 3 fingers holding on to the pick. It should just be the thumb and 1 finger, the index finger, okay? So that's the first thing to appreciate. Now, the other things about how the pick strikes the strings, okay? And there's different ways it can strike the strings, but again, I'm going to push you toward the best way for this kind of guitar playing, which is this kind of strumming playing. And that'll translate into the single note stuff eventually when you're playing a lead or something. But for strumming, this is how to think about the pick striking the strings. And what you want to do is get good contact between the pick and the string, and it gives you the more full, robust sound if you've got good contact between the pick. Well, how do you do that? Well, the first thing to think about is the angle, okay? The angle that you're holding the pick. Now, that could mean a couple things. As I'm holding this pick by the strings, I could angle the pick this way. So I'm turning it, right? I mean, the extreme version is I'd be striking the strings with the edge of the pick. Now, you don't want to do that, obviously. But the ideal thing is to have it flat so it's right against the pick. The face of the pick is on the same kind of plane with the string. So it's striking the face of the pick, okay, fully. And you'll get a better sound if you do that. Now, most of the time that seems natural, and that's probably what you would do, so you wouldn't angle it. But there are techniques and specific situations where you might angle the pick to get certain kinds of sounds. Angle it a little bit, maybe not a lot, but a little bit. And maybe when you're strumming, if you're not taking care, up here you might be hitting it pretty flat, but by the time you get down here, you're hitting it at an angle because you're hitting it you're moving your hand in an arc like that. Well, you don't want to do that. You want it to be hitting flat all the way down like that. Okay. So attend to that angle. Okay. The other kind of angle is this kind of angle, like this. I'm rotating this way, right? Okay. And when I strike the strings, I basically want to have a little bit of angle so that the tip is kind of dragging behind. Okay. So there's a little bit of angle, so my pick is, in essence, it's kind of pointing back up at me. Okay. And you don't want a lot of that, but you want some. Okay. You want some. And it just helps the pick slide over the strings. If you have it perfectly straight, it's a little bit harder to get it over the strings smoothly. But if you angle it a little bit, you're in better shape. Okay. Same thing when you're coming back up, but you got to reverse it, right? So you twist this way a little bit when you're coming back up, when you're doing an upstroke. You can strum the guitar either way. They get slightly different sounds, but a lot of times when we're playing, we're using some kind of combination of upstrokes and downstrokes. So something like that, okay? But when it's coming back up, you want that angle to be the other way, so the tip is dragging behind, but now it's kind of pointing down away from me and making it easier for the pick to come up over the strings. Now And some of that happens with your hand, like I'm doing right now. And I'm exaggerating this wildly so you can see what I'm doing. But like this, and then I turn my hand to bring it back up. Now you don't do it that much when you're playing, but you do it a little bit. And it really helps the pick move over the strings, okay? So think about that angle too when you're holding the pick. The other thing about the pick, and this is critically important, I think, is that you shouldn't hold the pick too tightly, okay? And this is a mistake I made when I was playing early on, and for several years in my playing, I just really holding on to that pick, death grip. I didn't want to drop it. I'm holding on for dear life, and when I'm doing that, it's really harder to move the pick over the strings. And that's why I liked those really, really super thin picks that bend a lot, because I was holding on to it so tight. Okay? But that's not the best way to do this. In fact, it actually hurts your playing in lots of different ways to hold the pick that tightly. You should be holding it loosely like this so that the pick can move like that, So, that kind of soft part of your fingers there allows the pick to move up and down like that, okay? And that's what you really want. You want a nice loose grip like that, and it helps produce that angle, right? So I don't have to do it so much with my hand. It happens because the pick is loose, and so when it hits the string, this is the string, it bends like that. Not bends, it pivots like that, right? And then when it's coming back up, it pivots the other way, right? And so it produces that angle that we were talking about. And so that loose grip helps produce that angle, and that nice, it gives it a nice sound too, okay? So that's very important. Don't hold that pick too tight. The tension in your hands, both hands, really can impede your playing, and you've got to kind of train yourself, and it's not easy, to relax. Okay, so you need to relax your hand, relax your arm, and both hands, so that you're not fighting so hard when you're playing. Now, as you're starting off, that's going to be extremely hard to do, and so I don't want you to waste too much worry or mental energy on it. But as you continue to play, try to relax your hands. Okay, your pick hand should be real loose like this, not like this. Okay, loose. That you got the fingers holding the pick, but these other fingers, they ought to just kind of flow. They're not participating in holding the pick, so they can just be loose, and that helps you be more. Ought to be like that when you're playing, nice and relaxed. Okay, so those are important things about holding on to the pick. Okay, but don't worry too much about it. It'll come, but try to get to these kinds of positions and these kinds of orientations as you're going along, and it'll help you do better. Yeah, particularly when you're struggling with something, you might just think about how tight your hands are. Okay, all right. So that's it for the pick, and I think you'll find that way of holding it will work really well for you. I forgot to mention when I was talking about holding the guitar, is the position of your arm here, okay? And one thing that's nice about a nice full-bodied acoustic guitar is there's kind of a nice rest for your arm right here. And you want to have a loose, speaking of relaxed, you want to have a nice loose kind of elbow movement. You want that to move freely, okay? So you can kind of put your arm on the guitar in a way that allows that to happen. That's what you want to happen. You want to have free movement of your elbow and your wrist. Those are both parts of strumming, both the elbow movement and the wrist. You don't strum with just your wrist, and you don't strum with just your arm, but both of them contribute to that strumming motion. Okay, so just have that on there, kind of droop it over your guitar and have it feel comfortable. Okay, all right. So I think that's it in terms of holding the guitar and the pick. Let's move on to talking about the parts of the guitar real quick. And, this isn't a really critical part of these guitar lessons, but it's good to know what's what, and I will be referring to various elements of this as we go along, and so it's a good thing for us to know what the different parts of the guitar are called, okay? All right, so the first part is the headstock, and that's this part up here, okay, where the tuning apparatus is up here. This is the headstock. And there's really two basic kinds of headstocks. There's the ones that have 3 of the tuners on each side, like this one. And then there's the one that have all 6 of them on one side, like this one here, that has all 6 of them on one side. The differences between those for the purposes of this course are really quite negligible, and so you don't have to worry about it. But those two kinds exist, and there's a lot of other things that people do with the headstock that are, they're more about style than they are about function. But there are functional elements to this too, but they're not really things that are critical enough for us to worry about in this course. And people who are pros, they use both kinds. It's not something that inhibits you from playing a particular thing. Okay, there's some advantages and disadvantages of those, but again, we're not going to go into that. Okay, so that's the headstock up here. On the headstock are the tuners, and that's another very important part up here. And those can be called tuning pegs or tuners or machine heads. Okay, you'll hear all of those terms, and they're all talking about the same thing, which are these little things that tune your guitar, right? And you probably already realize that those are what you use to tune the guitar. We're going to tune the guitar in just a minute here, but that's what these are for. And they tighten and loosen the strings. As we tighten it, it gets higher and gets more sharp, right? And musical terms, sharp is higher. It's like you're going up the top of the mountain to the sharp peak up there, okay? That's sharp, higher. Or we're loosening it. When we loosen it, it makes it lower. It gets flatter in music terms, right? So we're getting down into the valley, down to the flat part, okay? And so that's what these tuners do, is tighten and loosen the string to change the pitch from lower to higher, okay? On the tuners, there's this part here that's actually on the face of the headstock. That's called the post, okay? And that's what you wind the string around. We'll talk more about that when we have a lesson on changing strings. But that's the post right there, that part that sticks out of the guitar and holds the string, okay? All right, then the guitar, the two kind of main things, pieces on the guitar, are the neck right here, the neck, you obviously know that probably, and then the body. This is the body part down here. Very straightforward. On the neck, there's kind of usually 2 pieces to it. There's, the back of the neck, the round part where your hand rests back there. And then there's the fretboard up here, right? This part. And if you look at most guitars, you can see that there are actually 2 pieces. There's this part back here, the round part, and then there's a fretboard that's glued on top of the neck, okay? So those 2 pieces together make up the neck. The fretboard itself, this is this part up here, obviously that's where the frets are, okay? And so these metal pieces that go up the guitar, those are frets. Those are called frets, okay? Those little metal bars. And that's how we, when we press down the string, it changes the note. Because instead of letting it vibrate all the way down, we're going to push perhaps here, and we get a higher note because we're pressing it against that fret. So we're only letting it vibrate from here to here, and that shorter distance makes a higher note, okay? Okay, so those frets go up and down and help us get to different notes. That's what they are, okay? On the face of the fretboard, there are usually, not always, but usually there's some kind of markers. These are called fret markers. And they're usually, but not always, at the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and 12th fret, and then it repeats. It's the 15th, but it's the same as the 3rd. It goes to the same pattern. Some guitars have them like this. Some of them have, they won't have the third one, or they won't have the ninth one, or whatever, but it doesn't really matter too much. This is fairly typical setup. Most guitars will have something like this. The 12th fret one always has some sort of special mark, right? And so on this guitar and many guitars, there's 2 dots instead of 1, and that's the octave. And so that's the same note but higher. And that's kind of where everything starts over. So now you've got another, set of notes up here that are the same as the ones down here. They're just higher, right? And so that octave spot is important on the guitar, and so it gets a special mark of 2 dots. Some guitars have no fret markers. That's tough when you're starting off, because it's harder to know exactly where you are when you look quickly. Some have just the octave mark, and some have other kinds of setups. Okay, but there they are, and that's what they're for. The ones on the face of the guitar aren't all that useful, because it's kind of hard to see them. I mean, you can't really see what's going on without angling the guitar. You can't see the front of the guitar like that. And so they also have ones on the side of the neck. And I'm just going to hold it close to the camera so you can see there. All right, so it's got the same setup. There's a little dot there on the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9, and then it's got the double dot at the octave, okay? And those are the ones you actually use most of the time, okay? Because those are the ones you can see easiest when you're playing the guitar. I just look down and I can see those dots, okay? And, and they help you know where you are on the neck. You got to play something that's the 6th fret. Well, it's between those 2 dots, the 5th fret dot and the 7th fret. So you got to be in here on the 6th, okay? And it helps you. And you will almost, without realizing it, become dependent on those. I hate it when I play out somewhere and there isn't very good stage lighting, and I can't see the dots on my guitar, right? And I have trouble making everything work as easily as I normally do, because I can't see the dots. I can't see the fret markers, or the side markers. These ones are called on the side of the neck, the side markers. Okay, those are very helpful as you go along. There's not the reason why they're in the particular spots they are is kind of arcane, and it's not worth going into. They just are, okay? 3, 5, 7, 9, 12. Just that's where they're going to be if they exist on the guitar. Alrighty, that's it for the fretboard. Now, there's 2 other really important things with respect to the sound of the guitar. It's the nut, which is this piece up here, this white piece, and that's what stops the strings from vibrating any higher, right? So this is kind of the start of the sound part of the guitar, is at the nut right here. So if I'm playing an open string, it's vibrating all the way from this nut down to the bottom of the guitar down here, right? That nut is making the rest of this up here kind of irrelevant in terms of the sound of the guitar. That's what the nut's doing, is it's cutting the string right there, okay? There's little grooves in the nut that hold the string in the proper position, okay? On the other end, we have the bridge. This whole little apparatus down on this end of the guitar is called the bridge, and there's lots of different kinds of bridges on guitars, especially when we get into the electric guitar realm. Oh my Lord, there's all kinds of bridges and apparatus that you can manipulate down there. We won't talk about that too much. I might mention a little bit of it when we're changing strings again, but this is a very typical kind of setup for an acoustic guitar. There are some acoustic guitars that don't have this setup, but not many, okay? Most of them have this kind of setup, and what's going on here is there's this piece, this white piece that's in here, that the strings go over, and it's basically doing the same thing on this end as the nut is doing on the other end, right? That's the limit of how much the string can vibrate from here to here. And so that'll be the lowest note for each string, is that, okay? There's usually little tiny grooves in the saddle. The little white piece is called the saddle. The whole thing together is the bridge, but the white piece is called the saddle. And again, so it kind of helps hold the string in the right position. That saddle is what transmits the vibration of the string to the guitar, and so it's what gets it to the face of the guitar that vibrates, and then also into the hole in the inside of the guitar, so it can come out of the sound hole. Okay, so that's another important piece of the guitar, is that saddle. All right. All right, so I think that's, oh, well, the other thing on the bridge, on this kind of an acoustic guitar, is that there's these little pegs here, you can see, and they hold the strings in. So when you change the strings, you got to take those out and put the string in, and then put the peg back in. That's what holds the string there. So there's one of those for each string on an acoustic guitar. And again, we'll go into that more when we change the strings on the guitar. All right, and then I mentioned the sound hole, okay, and acoustic guitars, almost all of them, have some kind of sound hole. Most typically, it's right in the middle of the guitar under the strings like this, and it's what kind of lets the sound out and, you know, kind of acoustically amplifies it so you can hear it, right? If you have an electric guitar, it won't have the same sound because it doesn't have that kind of sound hole in it, all right? So that's another piece you typically see in a guitar. Like I said, most of them are in the middle. Sometimes there'll be one up here, maybe. Sometimes there's a series of smaller ones like this that, you know, they produce the same purpose as the one in the middle. Okay. All right, and then the strap buttons. And so the strap buttons are on guitars, so you can attach your strap. And there's just two basic configurations of these. Almost always there's one on the bottom here, like this, okay? And then there may or may not be another one up here somewhere where you hook the other end of the strap, right? Okay. Most of the time it's there, but there's some guitars where there isn't one, or older guitars tend to they're not as likely to have a strap button on this side, okay? And so what do? You've got one end of the strap hooked on down here, and then there's not a strap button up here. What do? Well, I have a guitar like that right here, okay? And the way these typically are set up, the straps on them, so I've got this one hooked up, I've got the strap button on the bottom, and then the top goes all the way up to the headstock, and it's attached with a string like this. And the string just goes underneath the strings. You can see that there. It's underneath the strings, just loops around under there, right behind the nut. And then it just, you know, loops over into the hole in the strap as well, okay? And that's a very typical setup if a guitar does not have a strap button down here somewhere, okay? And it holds the guitar just fine, and people used to do that all the time. Some straps even come with the string like that. It's a very common, typical thing to do. And some people actually think the guitar hangs better and it feels better when it's hooked up out here instead of down here. Fine, you know, so you can do that. Even if you have a strap button, you can set up your strap like this if you want to. Okay, so that's what happens when you only have the one strap button. Okay, I think that's about it for the construction and the structure of the guitar as an instrument, but I did want to talk briefly about what's in a lot of guitars, and I did mention this in the video about buying guitars, that I don't know about most, but many acoustic guitars you buy these days have electronics built into them, and it's a super handy thing to have. What's going on there is that the electronics are picking up the sound from the guitar, and they're transmitting it out, and you can plug in to an amplifier, okay? And so that's great. And now it's not turning your acoustic guitar into an electric guitar. What it's doing is it's amplifying that acoustic sound. So it's not going to sound like an electric guitar when you use this kind of electronics. It's going to sound like an acoustic guitar that's been amplified. Back in the olden days, these kind of things didn't exist, and we used to stick a microphone here to pick up the sound from the guitar, right? And Not too many people do that anymore. You see every once in a while, they'll still see somebody doing it. But it's tough because you're stuck there with the microphone then. And if you just move a little bit, it can really change the sound of the guitar. And so, with this kind of system, you can walk around or do whatever you want, and that you don't have to worry about being right there where the microphone is. And those microphone setups, they're very susceptible to producing a lot of feedback noise, which you really don't want. And, it's a real nightmare for the sound people to have that kind of setup necessary for a guitar. So, and that's just all eliminated by using this electronic system. And so very, very few people still use the microphone version to amplify their acoustic sound. They use this kind of thing instead. It's very simple. There's somewhere on the guitar where you plug in the patch cord and then you plug in the other end to an amplifier. And there's usually two spots where the plug is. One of them is in the actual strap button. There's a hole in there on some guitars, and then you just plug the patch cord right in there, like that. Ta-da! And now I'm ready to go. I plug the other end of an amp, and I'm going to get a nice acoustic sound coming out of that. The other kind of setup is there's a separate panel somewhere on the guitar that has the hole for the cord. You just plug it in there, and we're ready to go. Okay, so that's the electronic system. The systems usually have a volume control and a couple of tone controls, maybe three. This one has three tone controls: a low, mid, and high, and then there's a volume, so I can control how loud the guitar is right from here. That's very, very handy. Okay, and I can change the how deep or how trebly the guitar sounds with the tone controls. Right. Some of them only have two. They'll have a low and a high, or a bass and a treble, they'll call it, and they only have two tone controls. And others only even have one. Okay, but there's something like that that's part of the guitar electronic setup. One thing that's probably worth mentioning, just in case you happen to have a guitar like this, is that sometimes the controls are actually right in here inside that sound hole. Okay, and so if you look in this guitar, I'm just going to hold it up. You can see there, if I get close enough, there we go. You can see there's two little wheels there that you turn. And one of them is for volume and one of them is for tone. Okay, and so there's quite a few guitars that have that kind of setup. It's less obtrusive in a sense than the big panel or something. And so some people like it, and they control it right here like this. Okay. So just in case you think your guitar has electronics and you can't find them, it might be because they're in the hole right there. Okay. All right. And so that's basically it for the electronics. If you have electronics in your guitar and you're going to use them to amplify your guitar, you'll have to put a battery in the guitar. And I would say almost all of them use a 9-volt battery, and there's some panel somewhere that you pop off and put the battery in. Okay, sometimes it's the little panel itself that has the controls on it, and there's a way to pop it up, swing it open, and put the battery in. Sometimes it's a separate thing somewhere else on the guitar. You pop the cover off and put the battery in. Okay, you can figure that out yourself, I'm quite sure. But the last thing about the electronics, that's the best part of it, is that most of them nowadays come with a tuner that's built right in to the electronics. And so, and there's different variants of this, but they're all basically the same. And I'm going to use this guitar to show you. But here's the panel on this one, and it's got a volume control, and then it's got a bass and a treble. And then it's got something else. It's got this little window up here, and a lot of them have something like that, and that's a tuner. All right, and so you just turn it on like that, and then now I've got a way to tune my guitar that's right on board. I don't have to have a separate pedal. I don't need to be thinking about some other way of tuning the guitar. It's right there. It's super handy. I love these. And I kind of almost wouldn't buy a guitar without one now. Electric guitars don't have them, but acoustic guitars do for some reason, and it's just super handy. to have that right there with you all the time. You don't have to carry around a separate tuner or anything. Okay. Now, how do they work? Okay. So this is tuning your guitar. We've moved into that part of this lesson, and it's very simple. Okay. What will happen is we'll play a string, and then this thing will tell us what note we're closest to. Okay. So we might be closest to a D or a D sharp or an E, okay? And then it'll tell us whether we're too low or we're too high, right? If we're too low, we're flat, and we need to make the string sharper. We need to move it up so it gets to the right tone that we're after, the right note that we're after. If it's too high, it's sharp, and we got to loosen it up and let it down. And so this will tell us whether we need to go up or down. And there's different ways that it tells you, but I'll just demonstrate it real quick with this one. Turned itself off because it took too long. Okay, and so here we go. Let me just loosen this up. I'll make it a little too low. I'll make it a lot too low to make sure you understand what happens. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this string is the E string, as we talked about in another lesson. And so we got to get this thing to an E. That's what we want it to be, okay? We want it to be an E. And so I'll pluck it, and I'm going to hold it up so you can see it here in a second. And then it's going to tell me that I'm too low, all right? So, and there's kind of two ways it tells you. All right, first, so here it is. Make sure we get close enough that you can see clearly what's going on. Here we go. All right, here we go. All right, so now I'm going to pluck the string. All right, and you can see what's happening. There's some lights flashing there, but it's telling me that I am closest to a D note. In fact, I'm practically right on a D note, okay? All right, well, D is too low, right? D, I want it to be an E, and so the letters, go up as the pitch gets higher. So A, B, C, D, E, I want to be up at an E, all right? But I'm not at an E, I'm at a D. And so I'm way too low, and I got to tighten this thing up to get it closer to an E. And so I'll do that. So here I go. I start. You hear that getting higher? All right. And so now I've gotten to the point where I'm at a D sharp, and that's indicated there's a little dot beside it. So now it's a D dot, right? You can see it's without the glare there. All right. So there's a D dot. So I'm at a D sharp, but that's still not high enough. So I keep going up, and eventually it'll turn to an E. Okay. So now I'm closest to an E where I want to be, but I'm not there yet. And this little indicator here, this red thing, is telling me I'm too low, right? And so I got to keep going. There it is. And then when they both turn green like that, that means I've gotten where I wanted to go. There it is, okay? I'm at an E. If I went too far, the red thing on the, oops, I went too far. I went way too far. Okay. Now I'm up to an F. Okay, so I've gone way too far. So I want to go back down. And now, so I'm at it. I'm closest to an E now, but this one's telling me I'm too high. And so I need to keep going down, and then until I get them both green again. There it is. My E string is now in tune. Okay. All right, and you can do that with each one of the strings. A string, D string, G string, B string, and it'll automatically figure out which one you're closest to and tell you what to do. Okay, so there's my G string. It's a little bit flat. So there it is. Now I got it in tune. See how that worked? Okay, and so all the tuners in these guitars have functions that work basically like that. Okay, super handy, awesome thing to have in your guitar. All right, so that's one way of tuning up your guitar. Another way is if you don't have a tuner in your guitar, is an external tuner of some kind. There's lots and lots of these. There's ones you can plug into. There's ones you can sit in front of you and they listen to the guitar. My advice to you is to get a clip-on one like this. They're cheap. and they're accurate, and they're super handy. Okay, and so what's the deal is this is a little, it's got a little display panel here, but then there's a clip here, all right, and that clip goes on the end of your guitar, like that, on your headstock somewhere. Okay, so I just clipped it on my headstock. And then this little panel can swivel around so you can see it when you're tuning your guitar. Now I'm going to swivel it around so you can see it, which is going to make it harder for me to tune the guitar, but let's see if we can make this work together. Okay, there's other ones. Here's another one. This is the same type of thing, and it has a slightly different way of telling you whether it's too high or too low. I'll just put them both on there. What the heck? And we can see them work. Okay, so let me turn them on. All right, so I got them both on, and what's going to happen in both cases, they're going to work like the other tune. They're going to tell me if I'm too high or too low, and then I'm going to adjust the guitar to adjust the string to pull it in line. Let me just move this one down a little bit. Okay, so here's my D string, and I put it a little bit out of tune, a little bit too low. All right, and you can see on this one, what we're going to do, we've got this red mark here, and we want to move it toward the center so it'll be in tune. All right, so if I tighten it up, that red thing, red dot, will move closer to the center, and eventually the red thing will disappear and the green one will get darker and it'll tell me I'm in tune. Okay, this one here, it's actually got a little needle, right? And that needle will move closer to the center, and when it's at the center, it'll be in tune and it'll flash green, so we'll know that it's in tune. So let me just get up closer so you can see. All right, so I'm too low. Both of them are telling me the same thing. So now I'm going to tighten it up. See, it's getting closer to the center. Almost there. There it is. Do you see how they all flashed? I'm in tune. The one at the top, the outside, the red markers on the outside flash too. And it's perfectly in tune. You see that little flash on both sides? That means I got it, right? And then the lower one, the display turns green. I got it. Hey, I'm in tune. Okay, so that's how those work. These are super convenient. You can just leave them on the guitar. I have several of them, and you just you leave them on while you're playing. And then if something sounds off, you flip it on, or you can even leave it on, and then you just tune right on the fly. It's super handy. I have a bunch of them because sometimes I'll play somewhere and I need a couple different guitars for various reasons. I'll just clip one on each guitar, and then I'm ready to go, and I can tune them up on the fly without fiddling around with anything else. They run on these little disc batteries. You probably have seen these by now because there's a lot more things that use them. You can pick them up anywhere. But that's how those ones work. You need those little disc batteries. Okay. All right. So that's it for tuning with electronic tuners. Now you don't have to have electronic tuner, although I recommend getting one, and they're not that expensive. Those little clip-on ones are, probably $15 or $20. You can get them for more. You can find more sophisticated ones that are $40, $50, $100 more. But those ones work just fine. And so I think investing in one of those is probably worth it. All right, but there's other ways of doing it. There's phone apps. So on these phones these days, they have so many functions, and they have some that are really geared toward guitar. So if you go in the App Store, you can just search guitar tuner, and there'll be screens and screens of guitar tuners. Some of them free, some of them you got to pay for, and they work just like these. So they'll listen to the note that you're playing, and it'll tell you whether it's too high or too low, and you can adjust and tune it up. I basically don't think they work that well, and it's not because of the tuner that's the problem. It's because the microphone in the phone is not really set up to hear guitar strings that well, basically. And so it can be a little bit frustrating when you're trying to use them. But they're there, and you can actually make use of them, make them work. I have one I will just mention. It's called Clear Tune, and this is the way it basically looks. You can't see the top too well, but it's got this wheel down here, And so it just moves back and forth as I'm moving the string up and down. It moves, the wheel spins basically, and so it's real easy to tell whether you're too high or too low. And it spins in as you're manipulating the string to the note that you want it to be at. You want it to be at an A. You can see exactly where you are, and it takes you slowly up to the A. Right. This also plays the tones. If you want a reference tone, you can turn it on like that, and it'll play the note, and you can change it to any note you want. Right, you can change it. This is an A flat it's playing right now. There's an A, and it can play it at different octaves too. And that can be handy for various reasons. I don't use that much to tune my guitar, but I use it for other purposes in my musical life, and so I find that one works reasonably well. Although there are limitations because of the phone itself. All right, but that's another way of doing this. You can also get reference tones like that, so you could use that tone to make it play an E, and then play your string and match it with your ear by listening to it to match it to the tone. You can do that with a piano. If you have a piano around and you know where the E note is on it or the A note is on it, you play that note, and you can tune your guitar and make it match that note. You can find those reference tones in other places. On YouTube, there's guitar tuning reference tones, and so you just put in guitar tuning or something like that. I'll put a link to one of them in the comments or in the description of the video here, so you can find that easily. But tuning by ear is tough, and when you're just starting off, your ears haven't been trained up enough to do that super accurately, and so that can be hard. An electronic tuner is just so much better, so much more accurate. And one of the other advantages of using electronic tuners is that you can do it even in a noisy environment. It doesn't have to hear to tune the guitar. It's clipped on the headstock. It's picking up the vibration as you're playing. It's not hearing the note. It's picking up the vibration from the guitar itself. And so you can do it in a noisy environment, and even if somebody else is playing, you can tune perfectly well with those electronic tuners. So they're just handy, and they help you stay in tune so much more easily than trying to do it by ear. That's something you might develop later on, but I don't recommend that as a way to start off. You might do it by ear, and then you get done, you think you've got each string lined up properly, and then you play the chord and it still sounds off. And that's because your ears just haven't been trained up enough to do that well. Okay, so go for the electronic one if you can. You can also tune the guitar to itself, basically. If you have one string is in tune, well, then you can play the other notes on that string and match them up. So let me just put my A string out of tune for a second. Okay, and it turns out, and this is something we'll learn more about as we go along, but this is on this E string, this lowest string, I can play an A note on that string. It happens to be on the 5th fret. So there's my E, there's my A. Well, A is what the next string is, and if I count it up on my notes, I could know that was an A, because I'd go E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, like we talked about in the last lesson. So there's an A. And so now I got to take my next string and just match it to that. Oh, it's too low. So I'll go up a little bit. Almost there. Almost there. There we go. Basically there. Okay. And then I use that string to play a D. So A, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. And that's the next string I need to tune. Okay, that's already there because I didn't put it out of tune. Okay, and so you can use that method to tune the guitar as well. That's probably even tougher than matching notes to reference notes, but you can do it, and it's something that might be handy in various circumstances. But again, the electronic tuner solves all of the problems with those other tuning methods, and I think it's the way to go. All right, time to end this lesson. That's it for the preliminary stuff for the course. Now we're ready to actually start playing some guitar, and in the next lesson, we're going to learn some chords, and we're going to get going on songs. And within 2 more lessons, we're going to have the apparatus that you need to play tons of songs, okay? And so we're going to move right forward here very quickly now. We're going to really accelerate and get you going playing the guitar. So I'm excited to get to this part of the course. I hope you are too. See you at the next lesson.